Hello, everyone. We're back in the track, especially the APIs and platform and product strategy track. We will start with the CEO and co-founder of Airbus, something that's really buzzing these days about helping developers and tech teams to move data from a place to another. Yeah, the company is like really on a rocket ship, solving a huge problem we have been addressing over the last 10 years. We're really glad to have him to talk about the evolution of data movement. I'm really glad to have to host on this virtual stage Michel Tricot. So Michel, are you able to join? Hello,
I'm
Michel.
able to join. Hi, Mehdi. Thank you so much for having me there.
No, thank you for taking the time to being with us. So yeah, you have something about like data movement to explain to us, right?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, so basically, what we're going to be talking about is how you get data to move from point A to point B, which is every single company in the world has data silos, and the question is how do you make this data useful, and how do you make this data available to your teams? And just a little bit of background about me. So I'm Michel Tricot. As Mehdi said, I'm the co-founder and I am the CEO of Airbyte. Airbyte is an open source data integration platform. We released it back in October 2020, and 2021 has really been about the massive adoption of Airbyte across the data ecosystem, across different companies. Today we have about 30,000 deployments. We support out of the box about 180 different data connectors, moving data into most of the common warehouses, whether it's like Databricks, Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, and other. Oh, sorry, it seems like people cannot see the slides. That's weird. I see it on the screen. Okay. Okay, let me continue. And yeah, we have a pretty large community of about 8,000 people that are either users of Airbyte or builders of connectors, maintainers of connectors. And that's a little bit about Airbyte. It's really about you take data from any kind of place and you move it to another place. So when you look at the evolution of data movement, there's been a massive shift in post 2010. Before, it was really about integrating very large data sources, mostly databases, and very long process that was basically the realm of data engineers or engineers themselves. And it was this long process of extracting data, putting it into a staging place, transforming it, putting it into a warehouses, and loading it then into places where the data can be consumed by the rest of the company. The thing is, that was something that worked in the past because the amount of sources that you could have as a company was very low. Today, every kind of product, every kind of tool that you're using is a data source. So APIs are a data source, files are a data source, spreadsheets are a data source, and more people are actually looking to leverage that data. And the way we're seeing things transform today is gravitating around data warehouses, who have become almost like the interface for people to consume data. And everything now is done within the warehouse. And it's not just about loading the data into warehouse, doing analytics. It's also about extracting data away from the warehouse and sending it back to places where this data can have even more value once it's been processed. So databases, files, even APIs. So how do you get data from a warehouse back into Salesforce so that your sales team can make more informed decision? And the same for BI tool. So there are a few reasons why this industry of data movement has changed. Is first one, cloud compute has changed over the past 10 years. It is much cheaper. Storage costs almost nothing. So people can afford to just move massive amount of data and store massive amount of data. There is also an exponential growth of data. Like every single year is adding more and more data sources and more tools. So creating more and more silos. And this is what is really causing this shift is APIs are not just like a technical interface for a product. It is the product itself. It is both the product and it is also a data store, meaning that the more APIs you're consuming is a very good proxy to count like how many data silos you actually have. And having access to all these silos has become a key challenge for most companies. Like, how do you reconcile, how do you merge data from your NetSuite instance, from your Salesforce instance, from your Stripe instance, and how do you have like this global view of what your data look like, what your customer look like, what is the journey of your customer? And also the warehouses have enabled new people to consume data. So the way we access data has changed over these past few years. And this change in how we want to consume data has actually led to a new paradigm for the movement of data. It used to be about extract, load, like extract, transform, and load, and we've moved toward more like an extract, load, and transform. So first, a little bit of a reminder of actually make decision or just take action based on this data. The problem with ETL is that, first of all, in the current world, because of it is extremely inflexible. Every time you have an issue with your data, and that will happen all the time because of the transformation, most of the data needs to be re-extracted. It is also very hard to add new data, because now when you want to pull the data out of a system, you also need to figure out like what kind of transformation you want to apply to it. And there is a lot of friction for how you actually update a data pipeline, because you need to be familiar with how do you extract, how do you transform, and how do you load. And it also goes against what warehouses are enabling today, which is warehouses have made data consumable by more people. And ETL, because it's generally a very custom, very end-to-end system, is not, or is hard to approach by less technical people, meaning that the load of working with data is always put on the data teams and on technical teams. So that's one of the reasons why ETL is not working today. Now, when you're looking at extract, load, and transform, the idea here is really about, let's remove the friction from accessing data, and then let the people who really know what they're doing, who are domain experts, to do the transformation with the full set of data available. And for that, like, the extract is really just take the data, and load is just get the data into your warehouse. And that's all. And you try to stay as close as possible from the source data, so that people later on who wants to make an analysis, who wants to join this data with other data set, can actually have access to all of the data. So, and the fact that all the data is available at the destination level means that also your team is more agile. Means that you might have extract and loaded data for one specific analysis, but now the data is there. So if you want to do a second analysis, you can. Whereas with ETL, because the data has been transformed, then you have to re-import the data to do this new analytics. So development cycle, analysis cycle are much, much longer. In terms of autonomy, that's what I was saying, is the warehouses, and even if you start adding tools like dbt on top of it, they really allow you to allow data consumer to be less technical and much more at the business level for what they want to get out of the data. And also, it's more future proof. Like, it's very unlikely that you will have a bug at the extract and load level, but you will always have bug at the transformation level. And a bug at the transformation level when you are in an ETL model affects and forces you to re-import the whole data. Whereas in an ELT model, then it's just something that you do at the end, and it has less effect on all the different consumers of that data. And now the real problem that exists with data movement is, as I mentioned, APIs have become a data silos for a lot of companies. And there is an infinity of APIs. Thousands are being created every single years. And whether it's like new tools, whether it's new data sources, and because of that, it continues to get more and more fragmented. And what you need to actually have and think about when you're doing data movement is, how do you break down these silos? How do you enable people to have access to this data? So what we're doing is really about how can we leverage a community of users that can help on building and maintaining connector. And the maintenance is really the key piece about it, because it's easy to build, it's much harder to maintain because API keeps changing, data model keeps changing. So how do you make sure that as a single company with building your own connector, you don't have to always prioritize new project to get this connector to work with a new version of the API, and how do you actually crowdsource the maintenance of these data connectors? And this is how we're really addressing the long tail of APIs. We have like maintainer programs that allow our community, whether they are users, whether they are contributors, to actually own a specific APIs or share it with the rest of the community and have like this crowdsourced maintenance. One thing that we've seen with a lot of ETL or ELT services is that generally they limit themselves to 100, 150 out-of-the-box connector. And if for any reason you're using one of these long-tail APIs, you have to rebuild this system in-house. And this is where open source is helping. Now, as always with APIs, developer tooling is key to the success of any type of project that tries to cover the long tail. So how do you make sure that it becomes so simple to build and maintain APIs that in just a few hours, you can create a new connector and you can maintain it? And one thing that we've put a lot of effort on with Airbyte is the creation of what we call an Airbyte CDK that is built on top of a data movement protocol. And this CDK can take several shapes for very, very specific use cases of API, whether you're pulling data from an asynchronous API, synchronous API, very limited API, etc. And that's really what allows us to scale this number of connectors and allow data teams to be extremely efficient and to not spend time on the actual movement of data, but spend time on actually extracting value from this data. So in terms of how we're thinking about API, so first of all, it is going to continue to grow. Tools like Airbyte are going to continue to be used and needed by the market, just because the moment you start consuming a little bit of data and starting to get positive outcome from it, you become you want to get more data. You want to bring more data sets into your analytics stack and data stack, and it's just like a massively growing market. It's a fragmented market, but as the moment data movement comes into the equation, all these silos can be broken, and now people can really focus on just building APIs and providing data, and the data movement layer is going to take care of making that data available across your company. So that is all for me. And you can obviously use Airbyte. It's available open source. We also have a cloud version of it. We have a very active Slack community in case you need any information about how to use Airbyte, any advice on how to build a data stack, how do you integrate Airbyte into your modern data stack, what could be the best warehouse for your particular company. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Michel. We'll take the question from the audience. There is a 20-second lag between us and what the community is saying. Just a first question for you: APIs, ETLs, connectors, whatever future, maybe FTPs, whatever. Like, how do you see this data movement? Is it like does one type of technology will rule them all in the future, or no? It's just about like managing all in the same time.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I don't think for API it's possible to have a unified platform. You can have a unified way to describe an API, but you cannot have a standard for what does it mean to build an API, because an API, as I mentioned, is both a data store, but it is also a programmatic version of your product. So the moment you have your product into an API, your API will be very custom to how you're thinking about your product. It is just the reality. It's not just like crude. It's not just I get access to a resource. It's I operate a product via an API, and because of that, you will have all the subtlety of building a product, but in your API. Now, when we're thinking about the data movement, one thing that we're really focusing on, especially with Airbyte, is how do you make data portable? How do you create this layer that allows like a very low level layer to move the data from point A to point B? Because the moment you have that and you have that layer, then you just need to build application on top of it to make to add any kind of features around how do you move data efficiently, how do you move data in a privacy sensible way. So there is a unified piece on the movement of data, but for the API side, it's going to be much harder because there is a lot more business logic involved. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think an answer. We have a question about like moving data. Can we use Airbyte for moving data outside the company?
Yes. So I would say today it is not the key focus of Airbyte, but what does it mean? At that point, it becomes like, what does it mean to build data, to move data outside of a company? Key focus for us has been around the centralization of data into data warehouses. But you can completely imagine that moving data outside of a company is the other company has an S3 bucket or has a public warehouse where you can write data. And at that point, you can use data to move, you can use Airbyte to move the data into this external system. The other type of moving data outside of company is what I was talking before, which is what we call reverse ETL, which is once you have centralized data into data warehouses, once you've done your analytics, extracted potential segment about users, how do you make these segments available into operational platform? Like if you want to flag customers for like into Salesforce, into HubSpot, so that your marketing and sales team can make better action. This is something you can do, and this is what I would also consider to be like moving data outside of your company.
Yeah. Okay. So, interesting aspect on the sharing data access. At some point, the barriers will fade at some point. If, of course, security and authorization are covered. So we have a question about with Airbyte. How many connectors do we have?
Yeah. So today there is about 180 data connectors connecting from any type of sources, whether they are like APIs, files, databases, spreadsheet, or anything, into data warehouses. Now it keeps expanding. Our goal by the end of the year is to be supporting 300 different data connectors, but it's a platform. So you can add your own custom connector. If you have your own internal API and you don't need to share that connector to the outside world, you can also build your own data extractor for your internal API and plug it into Airbyte. Today, it's something that you can only do within the open source product, but it is also something that will come to cloud in the next few quarters.
Is there a cloud offering for Airbyte?
There is very much one. We actually released it 2 months ago, and one thing today with Airbyte Cloud that we're doing, it's about getting people who cannot operate or who cannot manage Airbyte open source, but also it's about features that will serve like larger team or larger organization. Like open source is really about solving the data movement piece. Cloud is really about everything that is built on top of the data movement piece. And yeah, that's one piece that is pretty important about Airbyte Cloud, something we're working on today, is there is a lot of sensitivity around data movement. And today there is a lot of companies who cannot tolerate that data gets extracted outside of their own infrastructure. Typically, if you're moving data from your own internal like product database or finance database into a warehouse, one thing we will be doing with cloud is the ability to just run the data movement directly within your infrastructure while still controlling it from the cloud product. So it's really about becoming ubiquitous and accessing data in any geography, any infrastructure, and any data sources.
Is there any synchronization capabilities on Airbyte?
Not today. This is not something we've been focusing on for synchronization. And we really see that as, you have this pyramid of data needs. And today we're really focusing on the bottom part of the pyramid, which is companies who are building and modernizing their data stack, buying their warehouse. How do we make sure that they get the full value out of the warehouses? Now, as you go up, you go more into the operational use case. This is where the synchronization exists. And this is something we will be able to handle with reverse ETL capabilities.
We have a question about the open source project. Like, what license is the project is under?
Yep, good question. We have two separate parts to the project. One which is the piece about connectors. This is all MIT, and the other one which is more about the operation of the connector, and this one is Elastic license. And the goal for the Elastic license is to make sure that people can continue to use Airbyte for free within their company. It is not preventing any kind of adoption. It just prevents people from creating an Airbyte cloud service. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, for people not completely familiar, licenses are complex. But yes, as you said, the Elastic license enable end users to still be able to continue to use the product like a kind of read permissively with like an MIT license, but just avoids you to rebuild hosted services like directly competitor for hosting it and reselling to others, right? Am I right, Michel?
That is correct. And the reason why we want to do that is part of covering the long tail of data connectors. It's about what we call our maintainer program, which is how do we incentivize our community of users, our community of developers to actually build and also maintain data connectors. And one thing that we want to do is to provide a rev share of the connector on Airbyte Cloud to these maintainers. So for that, we need to make sure that revenue of usage of connectors goes to Airbyte so we can redistribute it to the community and continue to improve the product.
It's a really interesting model. Actually, are you familiar with Tidelift? They try to fund the maintainers of famous open source packages, but it seems Airbyte is doing it directly for connectors. It's a really interesting model, actually.
It is, and I think that's one piece that is really changing compared to like other open source projects who've tried to do data integration open source. Is what very often happens is people build, but they don't maintain. The thing is, the cost is not in the build, the cost is in the maintenance. So you need to make sure that you have the right incentive for your community. And yeah, I mean, that's typically the kind of platform we've been looking at to see how we can provide that rev share to our developers and maintainers.
Yeah, and if the maintainers is not about the cost, but also he has the envy, the focus, the knowledge, right? It's a lot more than just maintaining just a piece of code. He's focused and knows exactly what needs to be done. So yeah, focus is key.
Exactly.
What's next for Airbyte in the next 6 months?
In the next 6 months, very good question. So first one is continue to expand our catalog of connectors, continue to improve on the developer experience for building new connectors. And the other piece is we have like a grading system for our connectors in cloud. And today, a lot of the focus is put on making database connector available in GA, and Postgre is going to be the first one. Like, databases are a huge use case for replication into data warehouses, and want to make sure that we offer like the best in-class data replication there. So this is a huge effort from for the team. The other one is we also want to, because it's data sensitive, like you have to be good with regulation within different geography. We are also preparing like launching Airbyte in Europe. So that's the thing.
Yeah, perfect, Michel. We reached the time we had together. Thank you very much for describing what's happening in this ETL, let's say, and globally the data movement pace and how it relates with APIs at some point, a different part of the stack and data flows. Thank you very much,
Wonderful.
Michel. Good luck for everything.
Thank you very much, Mehdi.
And now we will be on the other side, not more in the startup and tooling, but we will go back on a larger corporation with a past attendee who also became a speaker to Apidays conferences. Well, he will be talking to us about open banking and API. First, the status update at Abn Amro. It's Koen Adols. So Koen, are you able to join?
Yeah, I'm joining.
Yeah, so long time, right? You've been a attendee since our open API banking in, I think, in 2014 or 15. Then you finally become a speaker and the thought leaders on the space based on the work you've done. So we're really glad to have you.
Thank you. Looking forward to update you.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. So indeed, Koen Adels, product owner at Abn Amro for both open banking and enterprise integration technology. And that's also where I would like to update you on is how we see that those two stories regarding APIs are connecting, because everybody is talking about the open APIs, but also organizations need to invest in the internal world. And it's often not a connected story that is being shared. And I would like to share the lessons learned at our company. So the topics for today I would like to bring to you is, first, I will introduce the company a bit. Then integration is business strategy and not IT only. Where are we at, and what's the journey that we've had since 2015, so the first times that I attended the conferences as well, and what can you learn from our journey, and basically that's what you can grasp from the story. So just to update you a bit on Abn Amro. So Abn Amro is one of the three big banks in the Netherlands. We have business lines in retail banking, private banking, commercial banking, corporate and institutional banking, largely focused on the northwest of Europe, but also in certain domains internationally focused. All kind of daughter companies as well. And of course, integration is then an important topic within the company to move the company forth. And the main storyline of Abn Amro currently is to become a personal bank in a digital age. And over the years, you've seen the digital channels that banks are creating for themselves. So of course it started with internet banking, then mobile banking. In 2016 we also started with video banking, and especially during the COVID times, that is a new channel that ramped up rapidly. And next to all this, we have API banking, so APIs that we offer to third parties and our customers to get creative on the systems that we have. Regarding the internet banking, mobile and video banking as well, they need to run on something as well, right? So they need to run on backends. And for all these channels, it needs to be integrated customer experiences, aligned customer experiences overall. So that's also where you then come to how do you build a personal bank in a digital age. And where you want to be personal, you need to build a future-proof bank as well. Because future-proof is something that cannot happen with continuously making point-to-point connections to all kind of systems and all kind of spaghetti that you're creating internally. of course, you need to think about your architecture within your company. And in that sense, ABN Amro introduced the concept of the Zap Model. It's also shared to our investors, and ABN AMRO is heavily investing into our own channels, but also offering services via partners and platforms of others. And then the building blocks that drive these channels are, of course, the application programming interfaces. So we define enterprise APIs, which are driving our own channels, and in some cases also the channels of partners, and open APIs, where partners, fintech, big tech, subsidiaries, and customers can build their services on, so become creative. All to boost business, streamline cooperation between teams, but also between companies, and untangle IT. So those are the quotes that we use internally why APIs are important for our company. What we've learned, though, is that APIs is quite a journey for us as a bank, but also for our customers that are using the APIs. And I've shared this slide in the past. It starts with believing that APIs are important and which kind of digital ecosystems they could drive, then understand how to build them, what you need as a company, but also if you are a customer of ABN AMRO and you have a use case, understand how you could build that use case with one of our APIs. Then we need to enable each other to build the stuff on our APIs, create the platforms to secure them, etc. Support both the provider of the APIs and the consumer of the APIs, and only if that's all in place, then people want to change, then companies want to change, then digital systems are going to drive. And building all this on top of each other is quite a journey, both internally and externally. So what I often share to my fellow colleagues as well is that integration is not IT strategy alone. It's really business strategy. Because everything that we build within our own channels, we could also strategically offer to third parties, to partners, or to platforms of others, so that they can innovate, or they can help us to create the customer experiences in different ways. So, for instance, the transaction APIs, where Payment Service Directive 2 is, of course, a good example. We already have built payment interactions in our own channels. And if others can use it, they can build customer experiences on top. So a couple of examples in this case is where we have built Tiki. Tiki is our payments request application, which retail customers can use to send payment requests to friends, but also corporates can use the Tiki payment request to send payments to others. And the technology that Tiki is using is, of course, based on our own payment infrastructure as a company. Then on top of what we've built with Tiki, we offered a API to, for instance, SMS parking. And SMS parking is then sending customers a payment request when they want to park their car at a certain parking lot. But then SMS parking also got to know that those customers are sometimes not showing the right behavior. So they also got in contact with fraud. So a different API that ABN AMRO was then offering was the Business Account Insight API. And using both the Business Account Insight API and the Tiki API combined, SMS parking could create a secure payment flow for their customers and for themselves. One other interesting case which we learned last year is IBAN name check. So we already offer IBAN name check functionalities in our own channels, and it's being built with SurePay, which is a Dutch fintech, which is consuming the APIs of multiple banks to see if a name is correct when somebody is doing a payment. So both, if I do a payment to ING, I can see if ING's IBAN name check or IBAN name is correct. And when we offer those kind of functionalities in our own channels to our own retail and corporate customers in mobile banking, internet banking, etc., of course, when you offer APIs as another channel, you need to offer that same capability towards your corporate customers in our case to build in these controls into their systems as well. So next to the business account insight API, we now also offer the SurePay IBAN name check API, so corporates can use the IBAN name check controls in their payment flows as well. Then next to these cases, DHL has used Tiki in COVID times to better create new payment experiences for their employees and customers when people were delivering packages to the doors. And in the near future, at Dutch railway stations, there is also a new experience being created with Tiki. So a lot of PET bottles were put it into the trash cans, which is not very sustainable for the Netherlands. And the Dutch railways was looking for a solution. And now they are going to build PET gathering machines. And with a Tiki payment request, the customer is then being able to get some money for delivering the PET bottle to the machine. Our last case, platforms of others, is a very interesting one. So Abn Amro has a clearing, Abn Amro Clearing, which is delivering infrastructures for investments and to do your trades and stocks and building the connections to the platforms needed to do these kind of tradings. And Box is a Dutch fintech offering a trading app. And as Abn Amro, we offer the infrastructure for them to do so. And even within these, within that fintech app, we offer the innovative capability of doing fractional investments, which is offered in Europe for the first time via this way. So with these kind of examples, you really can see how internal API journeys and external API journeys are connected. So why do our customers use our API products? Because it's offering real-time interactions and data, real-time access. It's offering efficiency, security, connectivity, flexibility, and everything what a corporate wants to improve their servicing towards customers. So if you want to learn what you could build on top of our APIs, I would like to invite you to go to developer.abnamro.com to see all the APIs that we are offering. But as shared in this story, I wanted to update you on how our internal and external API journeys are connected. Because if you look at our architecture internally, you can see that we use our own backends, third-party backends, together with our API platforms. And based on that, we offer capabilities to our own channels and third-party channels. And we use an enterprise service bus, an internal API gateway, and external API gateway to offer these capabilities. And as shown, we have an external developer portal, but we also have an internal developer portal for our own colleagues to find the APIs of the other teams and learn how to build good APIs. So this is how we view as a connected journey, both internally and externally. As shared, we offer the functionality to search for the APIs that teams are offering. We have an API handbook where all the processes are explained, how to build good internal and open APIs. We have e-learnings, we have an API community, and this is often a capability that I have not seen around at other companies. So my advice to a lot of companies is also to look into what is your journey on this path and connect it to your open journey as well. Investing in education, how to build good APIs, is very important to build good APIs that developers want to use. But of course, also in the past few years, it has been shown that investing in your security, your platforms, how to build good secure APIs, how do you do your testing approaches, etc., and building those capabilities around that is important. So APIs are good for developers, but it's also very easy to make small mistakes with big impact. So it's also good for attackers. So building these central API platforms, central capabilities, central portals, etc., also helps us to get a good grasp on the security of the APIs within our organization. Just to give you some overview of how lengthy such a journey might be, moving towards an API culture is not a one-day transformation. So for companies that are on this journey or starting this journey, they will soon learn that there are quite some topics to learn. So in the beginning, in 2015, you could see that we were investing into service-oriented architecture 1.0. We were doing business process redesigns, but was all centrally organized. And in 2016, when we needed to open up for PSD2, you already could see that transformation going on, where we needed to decentralize our capabilities towards multiple teams, that they could build open APIs and internal APIs, where we run central platforms to facilitate those. So in 2017, you can also see that that transformation and organizational setup has been changed. And we've been building on top of that over time, to the result that in 2018, we were training a lot of business lines. In 2019, we started to launch our open APIs, but also we could see that the internal API portfolio was growing quite rapidly. And in 2020, new APIs were introduced, and as shared, we also introduced the internal API portal. Just to give some examples of what we've done in the past, but our journey is far from over. So if I look at our current way of working and what's ahead of us, I see that we've launched a couple of new open APIs last year. The use of APIs internally is rapidly growing. But we also see that the way of working and how to develop good APIs and the processes that we introduce to the teams can be improved. So in 2022, that's also where we will invest our time in to really improve in processes for internal teams to build good APIs. Next to that, of course, and that's also already shared by Maddie, for the open APIs, we do see that new regulations and evaluations of the current regulations will come into market. And I'm really looking forward to what that journey will be over time, because as PSD2 was a good introduction for what APIs could be for banking, we also see that it will move to more an open data kind of conversation, where it's not only about payments, but also about how the health industry, governments, telcos, etc., everybody could connect. And where we move into a different world as a continent. So just to finish it off, we are on our way, and what we've seen is that it's really a connected journey where you need to combine your internal capabilities and your external views, and everything that you've built internally in a good way, you could also reuse for external purposes and the other way around. And we are really looking forward to your journey. And the learnings, because what we've seen is that cross industries, there's the knowledge sharing can definitely be improved, and these kind of events that API Days is organizing are very valuable to this. But it's also more in-depth studies or in-depth knowledge sharing between industries could be a good journey for when we move to an open data world. So that's my story. Maddie, maybe you can come in again.
Yes, of course, I'm here. I remember you were the first I've seen, at least on my side. I've seen at some point in the past presentation you said it's versus it's ecosystems, ecosystems versus ecosystems, right? Do you still think your whole story has been about like killing the ego to bet on the ecosystems?
And I still really like that slide. But it is also a simplification of how it works. If you just move your ego away, then you can enter the ecosystem. And what we've learned over time is that APIs and investing into that as an organization is seriously asking for dedication, budgets, resources, and decisions. So it's sometimes also difficult to put your ego away, because you need to use those same resources for other purposes as well. So it is a lengthy journey to get from ego to ecosystems in that manner.
Yeah, in Europe, we let's say it's quite advanced on the open banking side, because the regulation came earlier than in the US, for example. That's not there completely yet. But the thing is, like when at Abn Amro, you've seen the shift between it's regulation driven versus it's business driven, right? It goes beyond regulation. When did you feel it?
So in 2015 towards 2018, it was really all about regulation and discovering and trying to grasp what the impact would be over time. Already in 2016, we were thinking about other opportunities as well, by both consuming the APIs of other banks or by giving additional services. And it was a granular transformation in that sense of the mindset. And still, sometimes you need to educate people about what the opportunities are of opening up. But definitely it is just getting into the journey and showing these use cases, what have been built on the Tiki API and the successes that we've created, also created a different kind of conversation for the other domains within the bank. So by building an API that you are willing to open up and experiment with, it's changing that conversation as well.
So maybe as the last question, what would be the main, let's say, if you have to resume it in one advice you could give for US companies who are not directly imposed to do it by regulation, but at least to do it before the regulation comes?
So if regulation is coming, then so how do you do strong customer authentication, and how do you create a standard approach for that? That has been a difficult part within Europe to implement the regulation of PSD2. It was also very difficult to have conversations with other banks about it because we were not allowed to. And which resulted that we needed to have our own idea on what strong customer authentication could be, what the flow would be, what a good standard for the industry would be, and each industry or each bank needed to do that separately because of the approach in Europe. If Europe is going to open up to other industries, or if other nations and continents are going to follow the example that Europe has done with PSD2, then definitely coming to a standard approach in an early stage about how strong customer authentication is being done next to an API interface, that's really a focus point, because the approach Europe took
we'll love to see you at Apidays London or Paris, which is more, let's say, your time zone. Then thank you for being there for Apidays interface with us.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Yep, thank you very much. And now we will have Patrick Bros, who is senior expert on APIs and data modeling design at Amadeus. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you today.
Nice to meet you too. So Manage APIs, one of the companies who have been really in the API space for a long time, pouring, I don't remember, a huge number of, let's say, ticket booking in comparison. I don't remember the number. You will be able to see it, to tell us probably. I'll let you on API governance, the 7 steps to select the right standard to design your API. Let's go, Patrick.
Thank you for that introduction. Yes, so we can discuss figures about that later on. I have some. Okay, so the idea is to speak about the first question that we have from our developers. Do you have standards to develop APIs? So basically, the idea is to give you the vision about what we have inside Amadeus from the developerportal.com, and basically when you want to implement as a customer and design an application based on our data. So basically, we have the portal. The portal allows you to access several kinds of catalogs. So we have airline IT catalogs, hospitality catalogs, travel channel catalogs. But you have a new one which arriving recently, which is called self-service. And the approach of the self-service is really a new generation of API, which are very data-centric. And for that, of course, we deliver an API contract. So but what will be the next vision for the future of Amadeus? The idea is really to continue to focus on data. And of course, we'll continue to deliver some solution with SDK and so on. But the vision will be to provide also some data catalog. So the API is still a channel for that, but we will integrate a new concept of data catalog. So this is basically to give you now what kind of standard that we can use to continue in that direction. So the vision is to consider that we will provide API, but also data definitions. So let's introduce myself. So Patrick Bros, working in Amadeus since 20 years now. And the proposal is basically to show you that in fact, Amadeus is a large company to manipulate a lot of data around airport IT, hotel IT, and basically to help our customer to build some solutions to sell travel product. So the first question that we have is what kind of standard we can use to design API, and how to go further to become an open API platform. So this is the beginning of the question is what is a standard? And basically the standard is basically a norm, something that basically which is recognized by someone, but how to use that kind of heavy process, heavy things when you want to have some challenge. So let me speak about a little story that we have recently implemented with the pandemic. where in fact we have to build build elegant and future-proof API in a minimum of time. So when you speak about elegant, what does it mean? When you speak about future-proof, what does it mean? And in fact, we have some, we created some safe travel APIs, which are the internal APIs to create a widget for our customer, for our website of our customer, to validate some health document QR code related to the test of the COVID and so on. So basically, the challenge was really to manage a complex functionality, but to stay simple to use, and basically allowing our customer to integrate new features step by step, because in fact we have to improve regularly the functionality, because we have new data arriving, and of course we have to do that in a short time. So what is the question that we have from our API designer? So basically our designer are saying, okay, I want to deliver an API contract, but the question is, okay, do you have some standard to help me to do that? Because in fact, I need to learn, but in fact, I need also to deliver. So for sure, we have to deliver the API contract. And what I'm proposing to you is basically to see what are the constraints that you have when you want to deliver a contract, and to come back to the beginning. So basically, I will propose you to do the reverse of the path, to say, okay, what are the constraints? And then we'll go back to do it in proper manner. So basically, when you speak about standard, you need to have some standard about messaging, the format of the data that you change, the data itself, and also potentially some data structure that you can reuse, the cookbook of your company that you have to follow, and also some industry specification, and why not to start from the beginning, which is, okay, I have a requirement, I need to model something, and I have to follow a methodology to do that. So basically here, the idea is I have to deliver a contract, and what are all the steps that I have to do to achieve something. And of course, the idea is, okay, what are the tools, what are the capabilities that the governance can give it to me to deliver that kind of things. So I propose you to go to all of these steps one by one, and we start from the end. And the first is about the communication and message. So what are the standards that most of our company are using in, let's say, API industry, or let's say API concept? It's HTTP. But what is HTTP? Of course, it's something that someone are using every day with your browser and so on. But what is hidden behind, and what is the original concept? So the P is for the protocol, the T for the transfer, and HT for hypertext. So what does it mean? Protocol, of course, you have a header, you have to exchange some information between systems, which is a transfer. But the most important things around that, when you look about the prehistory or the history of HTTP, is the concept of link and resources. And basically, when you navigate on the web, you can see that you have some pages and you have some links between those pages. So let me give you an example about the COVID-19. So basically, for example, we have a first resource, which is a report area, where you, in fact, in a specific area, a specific country, a specific city, you have some information about the COVID, and potentially in this area, you have some, let's say, some condition to verify a health pass. So basically, when you receive a health pass, you need to verify the condition associated to this country or to a specific area. And during the verification, potentially, you have to upload some document. So you see, you can consider that basically, you build the cartography of your resources related to your company, and the idea is potentially to use it as a web, thanks to HTTP concept. So this is basically, after that, you have to manipulate via some, let's say, URL to access a specific resource, and potentially you can manipulate with the basic CRUD operation, CRUD for create, update, read, and delete related to your resources. So this is the concept of HTTP, the concept of resources. The second standard is the format. What kind of format should I use? And basically, the API concept is ready to do an isolation related to your programming language. So basically, you have to serialize the data in a specific format, and we have several kind of format. And thanks to the organization of IANA, registering any kind of media type. So you can find JSON, you can find XML, but they are also registering plenty of format that you can exchange during your HTTP call. And thanks to that, the web is able to give you any kind of resource in any kind of format. Of course, if the server is able to deliver. So we have the HTTP, we have the formats that you can negotiate during your HTTP call. And after that, we will see the data. So when you speak about data, you have different kind of data. You have your business data, but you have also some reference data. And when you speak about reference data, you have some standard. Okay, what kind of standard you have about data? You have ISO, United Nation, IATA for airline industry. So basically, when you go to ISO, you have retrieve a lot of standardized data, like the code of the country, the currency code, and so on. So there is concept of standards that are very useful to be used in reference data. But what happens when a new emerging problematic is driving with the concept of a disease like the COVID? But in fact, you have to implement also a new kind of reference data, basically, which are still under construction. So, for example, the test type related to the COVID or the vaccine type. So basically, we discover that kind of new data to introduce in our reference data. And thanks to one of our partners to help us, a company called Riskline, they help us to build the data around all the disease information, which was basically not our original, let's say, activity in the travel industry. So thanks to them, but basically, apparently, it's difficult to find nowadays some reference data about vaccine type, test type, and so on. So this is the reference data. But what about your own data, or the data that you want to basically to publish via your APIs? And for that, you need basically to produce some models. And it's the same story. Do we have models, standard models in the industry? And basically here, it's depending also on your business. And at your company level, the idea is, okay, perhaps I can pick and choose some, let's say, external data model. I can select in schema.org, in IATA.org, or opentravel.org. So here you have an example about a data model related to IATA. And you have explanation, what is an offer item, what is an order. But you see, for the COVID, there was nothing. And in fact, you have basically at your company to yourself implement your own data model. So basically, you created a new section, duty of care related to disease. And basically, we created new models related to the disease area report, where in fact, basically, you can store a lot of information about the disease status, how many cases you have, how many infections, the evolution, the analytics of the disease in a specific area, in a specific country, in a specific city. And after that, basically, we will have basically some information related to each area. For example, in a specific country, you have some restriction to travel, you have some entry condition, exit conditions, and of course, what kind of documents are allowed to travel, and what kind of vaccine, even the model of a vaccine, have to be implemented in our system. So it's just to show you that, in fact, systematically, when you think API, you have to think about data first, and you have basically this concept of data modeling to implement. So either you can extract some data model from the industry or from some standard, or you have to build your own standard at your company level. And thanks also to Riskline to help us to design that kind of models, because in fact it was not our original, let's say, daily work. So you see, you have the data. Now you have also potentially your own data to manipulate, to build in your database, which is the data model. And the second step is, okay, do you have some cookbooks? Do you have some guidelines, standard guidelines in the industry to help me to design? And the idea is, yes, certainly you have some which are, let's say, neutral, like JSON-API.org, JSON-LD, but you have also some companies publishing their API stylebook on the industry, and you can find some from Atlassian, Cisco, Deliveroo, Google, Microsoft, PayPal, Red Hat, even the White House, Zalando, Adidas. So you see, even if you are not an IT company, potentially it's interesting to have a style book to help your designer to design and to produce and to industrialize the way to provide your APIs. So this is also what we have inside Amadeus. For the moment, they are under Amadeus.net, so inside our intranet. It's not published on the web, but trust us, it's basically one of the best, the state of the art of each of the best of design style guide. So when you have the style book, you have your cookbook to design, and of course you have to continue to identify what kind of standard you need, and there is some related to the API contract itself. So you have a documentation which is basically maintained by the Linux Foundation, so it's for REST JSON API. What is an open API specification? What kind of format you have to follow? But historically, in the past, you have the same thing with the WSDL, which was maintained by WCC. Here, you will see in the future that async API will be also a new kind of API contract that we'll have to deliver when we'll have to combine not only query reply, but also the concept of event-driven architecture. So basically, that kind of document is a standard to help you to specify in a structured manner the different endpoints that I show you at the beginning with the HTTP request. You need to define each endpoint and the description and documentation of each operation related to those endpoints, and potentially some description about the body query, the body response, and some errors status related to HTTP. So this is the standard related to the API contract. So we have defined up to here 6. Which one is the last one? The last one is basically the beginning. So you have a requirement from your customer. So how do you model the requirement? And let's take an old model which exists, which is a UML. UML is for Unified Modeling Language. So basically, it helps you to document basically different, what are the list of actors, what are the supported use case. You can provide some sequence diagram to explain a flow, to analyze what are the API flow, your internal, your external flow. But also you have some class diagram and state diagram. And state is quite interesting because the data is evolving during the time, and basically you have the capability to document that, at least during the analysis of the requirement. But this is just a tool. UML is not telling you what it is. Of course, it is a standard. Everyone can learn about it. It's part of our, let's say, toolbox. So, but without any methodology to build something, you cannot implement something. So there is a methodology to follow, and it's important for you, and perhaps you can follow that kind of domain-driven design, which is quite interesting in terms of approach, because in fact, you start to identify a common language in your company related to your business. And basically, it helps you to speak the same language between all stakeholders of your company, between business people and technical people, and basically the source of truth will stay in the code, and even basically 10 years or 20 years after, you can basically understand what was the original problematic and what was the original solution by using the semantic and the definition of original concept. So, okay, but do we have a standard, another thing, which is related to architecture? So the question is valid. So here you see we have basically the format, the way to document your API contract. But what is an architecture style? And I put 0 for that because basically it's something which is interesting, because there is no standard, or there is perhaps some standard, but one which is a principle, or principle of REST. And basically REST JSON API are nowadays very popular, but what does it mean behind the scene? REST is not, for sure, it's not a standard, or it's a list of principles that you have to follow during your design. And how to explain REST to your designer? This is not simple. I have this just a little example because I cannot explain you REST in even in 20 minutes. So I don't want to spend more than 1 minute about it. So basically, of course, you can do some reference to the guy who invented the concept, Roy Thomas Felding. But for me, in fact, when I try to explain REST to a developer, I try to tell him, okay, what happens when you change your mindset during procedural programmation to object-oriented? So basically, the mindset is the same. The idea is to consider your API data-oriented, object-oriented, and then you manipulate your data. So this is basically, for me, the simplest way to explain what is the beginning of REST, to build and to do everything around your data. And basically, your data is changing state, and basically, you can follow the state of your data thanks to perhaps thanks to a state diagram. So this is, let's say, the missing part, which is not a standard, but which is a strong principle to follow. So let now summarize where we are, and basically what will be your open API platform. So for sure, you have to deliver your API contract. At the beginning, you have your API requirement, and now you have to follow a path to build what? To build the cartography of your data resources, So this is basically the end point. What was if you take the catalog of all your API contracts, at the end, it's a cartography of all the resources of your company. And when you speak about cartography, it's a cartography of resources. And for that, you need to build a kind of data model library to help the designer to basically to share some entity cross resources. This is the baseline, and you have basically to invent your own standard, as I showed you just before. Each time you have a new requirement to verify if you don't have something already in your data model library, and if there is nothing, you have to invent it and to add it to your library to be used later on. So what is a model of vaccine, or model of health document? Of course, your API style book is part of the toolbox to help your API designer to design APIs in the same manner across your company. Of course, UML and domain-driven design are some techniques that are helping you as kind of standard to design a proper in industrial manner your API contract. And REST basically is here to accompany you as a principle of architecture. And if you have to follow another concept, you can continue to reuse the deliverables that you have. But those deliverables should not stop too much the delivery of your contract. And this is important to consider that around that, you have to provide a kind of code of conduct. And this is basically the concept of API or data model governance, to provide a code of conduct of all your API designer, basically to follow some, let's say, some important steps to be sure that you are coherent and you have a kind of homogeneity during your design, which is basically one of our major requirements from our API consumer. So this is a kind of summary of all standards that you can use during your API design. So I finished the presentation, or let's say the talk. So I'm very happy to answer your question if you have some.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Patrick. We just have 1 minute for question. I'll just ask you, like, what was the, let's say, on the cultural side at Amadeus, like how it has been easy or not to let's not impose, but actually to follow this like design guidance and principles, open API descriptions, like how it has been. It has been smooth, or did you find any like cultural issues happening?
In fact, you have the chance inside Amadeus to design API since 25 years, so it's not new in our company. So basically, it's part of our DNA to design APIs, and basically internally we know the problematic of data friction between those APIs, and we know ourselves some problematic between our own consumer. During the previous talk, the speaker speak about internal versus external, but in fact, all the bad experience that you have internally, you have to consider that you have the risk to provide that kind of bad experience for the consumer. So this is a good argument saying, okay, perhaps internally you have to manage some problematic, but you are in the same company. So imagine what will be the behavior of the customer. So basically the motivation is there to tell them, okay, you like to have something nice when you want to consume an API. So please take the shoes of the consumer during the design.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patrick. We have a comment from Rahib who's saying that, yeah, it was really helpful. So thank you very much, Patrick, and see you at next Apidays conference.
Super, nice. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Perfect. And now to end this first segment of the day, we will have Chris Phillips, senior technical staff and member senior technical staff member and master inventor at IBM, about how to grow your API consumers. Extremely important, as we can see with Amadeus previously, and with Marshall van Alstein at the beginning of the conference. Hello, Chris. How are you doing today?
Hi there. Good evening.
Perfect. Your slides are great. You can share it with us. I'll let you the floor for 25 minutes.
Sure. Thanks very much. So before I begin, I just want to say the last presenter did an excellent job. And I really agree with nearly everything he said. I just wanted to call that out because I don't think we do enough positivity in the world. So he did a great job. So if someone could tell him that, because he's probably already left, I'd appreciate it. But let's get on to this topic here. Hi, well, I'm Chris Phillips. I'm part of IBM. I'm an SCSM or Senior Technical Staff Member and an IBM Master Inventor. What really do I do? Well, I'm considered an API guru by the sales organizations, and I'm one of the guys that goes around the world talking to a number of clients who are generally in trouble, but not always, around that API strategy with our products. And I sit there and I understand what they're trying to do, and we try and both technically solve their challenges, as well as understanding what they're trying to achieve and put strategies in place to assist them trying to achieve to meet their goals. And because generally I don't see good projects, I only see projects that have gone wrong, because that's the nature of my job. And so we try and make sure we take the learnings from those experiences to provide to everyone else and come and do sessions like this. I have a blog. I write lots of stuff on it. Some of it's interesting, some of it's not interesting. If you want to take a look, please feel free. If you want to get hold of me, please send me a message via LinkedIn. So I'm here to talk about sort of how to grow your consumers. But before I delve into the core topic of it, let me give you the background for this. From what I've seen and from what my expectations are, I believe the world is changing. Today, lots of people are being measured by how much they can enable with their APIs. So how many of their facilities can they enable? This could be internal, this could be external. It's how many facilities can we put out there that Fred can go and use, or George in his garage, or Bob in accounting can come on board and use. And it's all about enabling stuff here. And they could, and people say things like, oh, we've enabled 3,000 APIs and every API has 1 or 2 consumers. But I think we're going to start seeing things changing more and more, because we're going to start seeing that I think teams are going to start being measured by how many people are being enabled with their APIs. So you have 1,000 APIs and each has a single user. It would be much better if we could instead expose 50 APIs and each have 20 users. And to try and meet that, I think we need to change and look at how we approach both API design and exposure. I'm going to repeat some of the things you heard in the previous session, everyone. And the key thing here is to understand who your consumer is. So the same takeaway point again as the previous session. And because if we start measuring on who our consumer is, or how many consumers we have, or how much reuse are we seeing inside the business, then we're going to start seeing different needs and different focuses. And it's not how quickly can we expose function. It's how low can we set the bar for complexity for consuming our APIs. And I believe that's going to be critical in the next 2 to 3 years. So what do you mean by that? So I've got sort of 2 or 3 main points in this short session. I don't want to overload too much like I normally do here. And I am going to use the similar strategies I normally do, as I ask you questions to ask yourself and give you some good practices afterwards. So growing your consumers falls into one of two camps. It's bringing new consumers into your ecosystem. This is critical because if you don't get new blood in, there is only so much money you can take out of some people. But also it is getting those existing people you have and getting them to grow more and more and more and use more and be more embedded and more integrated and consuming more of your ecosystem. So this, whether this is, again, quite a lot of people say, well, everyone has to use our APIs because that's what we expose internally. But do they have to use the APIs you have, or can they demand new APIs? Or can they dictate your strategy as the consumer and making it harder to manage and govern everything? So these are the two ways I'm splitting the session into. So firstly, how much does it cost you for you to onboard a consumer today? Now, this could be internal, this could be external. Could be, do you want to advertise it? Do you want to just have the time for you to go and register a user? Or how about how much does it cost a consumer to start using your APIs? So again, if this is inside your business, you need to go and find Fred in the accounts team. He has to come work out how to get access to your APIs, how to start writing code, writing the code to use them. He probably has a coding background, but he won't know all the intricacies of your APIs. How long does that take? How much does that cost the business to get him up and running? But if you're trying to look at the existing people, is how much does it cost you to maintain a consumer? Is that more or less than the onboarding cost? Normally it is less. Those are always some exceptions out there. But now you've published an API. If you change this interface massively, you're going to cause consumers to have problems. And how much does it cost a consumer to continue using your APIs? So hypothetically, if you change your API so that you rewrite the interface to be more intuitive, more logical, fitting your business model, and this impacts 1,000 API consumers, how many of those are going to want to make the change? Are you then going to be managing both the version 1 of the old way of doing it that doesn't fit your best practices, as well as version 2 that does fit your best practices? How do you motivate your consumers to move across? And how do you do it in such a way that's controlled, that isn't going to make them start looking at other options or making other demands? So the key things to take away from this, I like to say, is the good practices I want to recommend is version control and very few breaking changes. Now, this is obvious to everyone. But the key thing here, the thing that ties into this so clearly is when I say version control, I don't just mean have a standardized version system. I mean control the number of versions of an API that you have published. Understand why each version is out there. If you have 75 versions of the same API, as one of my clients once did, that's not 75 completely different functions. This is 75 versions of a single API. Then how are you managing that? How are you maintaining it? How are you controlling it? But also, we all accept breaking changes will have to happen from time to time, but make it so it's very much the exception. It's not just the fact of upsetting your consumers, causing them to have to spend time to replace it. This will break your trust with your trust with your consumers. They will start saying, well, if I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing, what's the competitors doing? Is that cheaper? Is that more interesting? Is it provide more details? Understand the consequences. There is no island here. There is no, we are the only game in town. Okay, some banks may declare they are, but if you want to get the best out of your consumers, you've got to treat them like friends. Have a developer portal. Remove the back office cost. Developer portal is great. Developer portal is your shop window. This is where you advertise your APIs. This is where you advertise your wares. This is where you explain to your audience what's available, what your strategy is, and most importantly, how they use it. And if they can self-service sign up because that meets your business model, awesome. That means they can start using the system and you don't have to get involved. It's not always possible, but if you can do that, you can make it so easy for people to start using your system that then they'll come on, they'll start playing swiftly, and then you'll suddenly discover you have more users than you realize. or you may discover you have more users than you realize. Oops, on the wrong screen. 1 second. Take into consideration the value of making breaking changes versus the cost to the consumer. So as I said before, if you decide to make a breaking change or even add an optional attribute, what's that impact going to be to the consumer? And you all may say, well, optional attributes won't have an impact because it's backwards compatible. Well, it is. But if you also have a rollback first approach to problems, so for example, you publish your new API with your optional attribute, and then 2 weeks later you discover a problem, so you roll back to the old version, that old version will then break anyone dependent on that optional change. So again, that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, but understand what the impact to your consumers will be. And things like monetization, directly monetizing the API calls versus as how much will that generate you versus what's the other costs you can get from the system, such as seeing consumer patterns, looking at the analytics, partnering with these people. How much innovation and new ideas can you get versus the money you can make from monetization? That's not to say monetization doesn't have a place. It does. But monetization always will increase the barrier or make developers less keen to get involved because there's a cost. And so my statement here is think like your consumer, which is very similar to the tagline for the last session. So I'm going to move on to my second core point here is consistency. How do consumers get started? So how do your consumers know what to use? How do they know how your APIs work? Are your APIs documented with examples? Do you have a sensible data model out there? Are you inheriting APIs or are you building from a green field? If you were brand new to this system, how long would it take you to learn to start using your APIs? And again, this is true for both external and internal consumers. As soon as you're starting, the people consuming your APIs are a different team from those who are actually building the APIs and designing the APIs themselves. Frequently, we're still seeing APIs designed purely around the data model that's being exposed from the system of record. And that's not always suitable because it's not always intuitive because it may have 20 years of development and evolution and organic growth. So always take a step back and say, if I was a consumer, how much of this could I understand without requiring 15 years experience in the business? But also, how many developer portals do you have? I was chatting to one of my clients today who say they have 6 different API platforms with 3 different portals. Okay, numbers made up to protect us, but they had multiple developer portals enabled from a variety of different products. How are your developers knowing which one to use? And there's nothing wrong with having multiple developer portals at all. Ideally, they'll all be our software, but there's nothing wrong with it. Providing you can explain, again, what each developer portal is. If you have, say, if you have a consumer who is consuming APIs from one developer portal, then has a new project that they want to build, a new idea, a new business direction, and they want to use another set of APIs, why do they have to go to a different developer portal? Why are they not all pushed and advertised together? It is acceptable to have multiple developer portals when you have multiple audiences, in my opinion. So if you have your business-to-business vendors, your internal APIs, your public external APIs, those could all have their own developer portal to provide that separation and security. But frequently I see clients who go, oh, we've got our mortgage APIs are here, our banking APIs are here, our balance APIs are here. And if you want to write an app, you'll need to use one of those 3 systems. This creates confusion and, quite frankly, frustration for the consumers. And a frustrated consumer is one who's less keen to continue or more keen to try and change things to make their life easier. We should be trying to make their life easy as soon as we can. And also, and again, I don't want to dig into this point too much because the last session covered this very well, in my opinion. Do the APIs follow the same pattern? Do your mortgage APIs have the same principles for return code? Do they have the same data model structure where the data is similar? Do they have the same approach to paths? And are multiple operations done at the verb level and path level, or different operations done as different APIs? There isn't one magical answer of this is the right way of doing it. The wrong answer is having the same contained API family using multiple patterns. Without consistency, people are going to struggle. And how frequently do your APIs change? Not going to dwell on the backwards compatible issue. I may have hit that recently, so I keep coming it up. But even if you're changing from version 1 to version 2 and it is a backwards compatible, how much do your consumers have to do their side? Hopefully very little. Hopefully that's something that can be fully contained. If it's all that change can be fully done on the provider side if the interface has not changed. But if the interface has changed, or other things, or even you just want to keep them updated, people are scared about regular change. So even telling them there's no impact to you, many large organizations will still want to sort of regression test everything with these new APIs, just in case, because their business depends on it. And how many versions are live for a single API? I've been through this analogy already, but always keep coming back to ask yourself, why do I have 6 versions of this same API? Why do I have more than 2 versions of the same API? 2 is the correct answer, in my opinion. You have the current one, you have the previous one. But there are always going to be exception cases. So long as there is a justification that's acceptable to the technical side and the business side for why this is creating additional cost, that is how I would look at it. So the good practice to take away from this is single developer portal per target consumer group. And an example of the consumer group is business to business people. Not each business would have their own one, but everyone who's considered a business to business person will access the same developer portal. You would have your internal developer portal. You would have your external developer portal. And one of the questions I frequently get asked is, why do we need a developer portal for internal consumers, the people inside our business? And my response always is how much time do you want your API developers helping people inside your business? You should treat them exactly the same way as you treat your external people, in the sense that all the documentation is there. It's all self-contained. And yes, they will still have to answer the occasional question, but the emphasis here should be on occasional. They shouldn't need sort of immediate long-term help from the development team. And if they do, it means your APIs are not good enough, and to go back and revisit those. And if your internal teams are having issues there, your external teams are definitely going to have issues. A consistent API approach, consistent models, consistent definitions, consistent language, make it as easy as possible to come on board. Clear and centralized documentation. You don't want people having to go all over the place, because no one will ever bookmark 3 different sites. They will bookmark one site, and that's where they expect to find everything, or at least links to everything that they need, both internally and external. And include not just the high-level description, but error codes, reasons, data models, examples, sample code, as well as onboarding instructions. And most importantly, think, what does your consumer need? If I was the consumer, how would I start using this? How would I start using this that does not involve interrupting the API development team who are building the APIs? Because at the end of the day, we need them to produce code. We need them to get the APIs out there. And finally, the last section I want to cover in my last minute, so I'll speed up, apologies, is how do consumers find your developer portal? How obvious is it? How do consumers ask for help? How do consumers find out about changes? And how do consumers help out each other? And finally, how do you make consumers feel valued? Apologies for the English there. How do you encourage and take the feedback and adapt given the feedback? And this is how do you complete the circle of communication all the way through the feedback circle. So the good practice here is engagement is key. If you don't engage with your consumers, then you're missing a trick here. They're the ones that tell you what's good and what's bad. Blog examples of how to use the APIs. Do basic marketing of your stuff, because the more people you have using it, the bigger the success you will be, and the more people you can adapt to meet the API needs. more people you can make adapt to meet what the API provides, the less specific APIs you'll probably have to develop in the long run. Provide social facilities that allow users to ask for help. This sounds obvious, but use forums. Use Stack Overflow. Get the engagement there. Maybe get your developers to have a look at it occasionally, not as a core part of their job, but just to engage with them, to understand the pain points and how do we address the pain points. And provide clear feedback system to allow your consumers to provide feedback. Maybe that's just an email address. Maybe it's a ticketing system. Maybe it is, I don't know, a meetup in their city, if it's a, but understand a route. Getting this feedback is critical. And finally, think like your consumer. Understand if you were consuming this stuff, how would you want to work with your team? So the one thing to take away if you want to grow your consumers, if you haven't already worked out where I'm leading with this, is think like your consumer. Understand exactly how they would be. Because if we don't think like our consumer, we're not going to have the consumptions that we want. So thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for that. I will just start by a first question. You know, we have a 30-second lag with the platform and the live, so
Yeah.
just waiting for all the questions to be asked. Just someone first, we already have a comment from Rahib who say, "Cannot agree more. Additional attribute is still consumer impacting." And so, yeah, it's true that optional fields, some people believe it's not breaking, but it's still impacting, right? And actually can impact.
And it's not impossible to break on the rollback approach as well. But yes, it is consumer impacting, and change scares people sometimes. Yep.
I don't know if you know this famous. I don't know if you know this famous XKCD drawing, right? We'd say like we. I think it's we stop overheating. You know, like when you touch the spacebar, but the spacebar touch on the keyboard, right? So we stop this to happen and say, oh no, I was actually using this for. You always break something. Workflow when you are changing something, right? You always change something.
It's how we keep life interesting. It's how we keep life interesting. We take something that's not important, change it, and then half the world is upset by it. Yeah.
Totally agree, Chris. We have one question about the adoption versus design. How can you know if your API is great? Because either you have a great value, so people will consume it anyway, even if you don't have a great docs. Because actually, yes, this is like the Twitter API, for example. Like even Twitter at some point it has been really, really bad on design, or Facebook has been really, really breaking a lot of APIs. They were a monopoly. Actually, a lot of people had to use it at some point. Versus a great API design versus in a really competitive environment where, SMS API or emailing API, like how do you manage the adoption versus the developer experience, let's say, impact on subscriptions?
This is a brilliant question, one that I cannot answer in less than 14 days and 6 hours because there's such a huge thing. How do you manage it? You have to understand that when you make a large change to move to best practices, you're going to impact your consumers. If you have 2 consumers, that may be an acceptable risk. If you have 1.6 million consumers and you have a monopoly, possibly that's an acceptable risk. If you have 5,000 consumers, you don't have a monopoly, that's possibly not an acceptable risk. And it's understanding the risk management here. And that's the key thing, really, is how much of the risk are you prepared to take? If you are making a change, you will probably lose some consumers if you have a large number, depending on the size of the change. And that's a business decision of what is the impact and market. And it comes back down to the usual market research. Talk to your community, explain why you're making this change, give them time for the change over, and all the support and care that you can, and nurture your community. If you know you're going to upset them, get in front of them, get ahead of them, and alert them ahead of time.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
To get first.
We have a question from Pat Young. How do you walk the line between providing content that is focused to noobs, right, on noob developers versus seasoned developers who may be looking for more robust content? Like, is there any difference in the way to doing it?
I don't think the content is different. The style may be different. But the way I look at this, so I'm not a prose writer. The way I would look at this is you should have the content there for a seasoned developer. But you should have the samples there for, as you call it, a noob. I would never use that term, but a noob. And understand that even when a noob is eventually going to get to the point where he's going to be seasoned, and it may get there quicker than you expect. So providing the samples to get them started and the 101, but then still you need to provide that deep level of context. If not just for your consumers here, that has been the focus of my session. You need that to ensure that your team knows how it works, that your team understands how it goes. So if your API developers all get offered $1 billion to go and work for someone else, and you lose your development team, the next generation can come in and pick up supporting them quickly. And that's an important thing here. This is the documentation side of this. It's not just for your consumers. It's also generally for your in-house support as well. Because, say, we all know what happens when developers change roles and there's no one to take backfill straight away. The knowledge can often get lost.
Yeah, in a past conference, speaker said, yeah, your documentation has to be multi-sided for the newcomer, the beginner, the product manager, for the debugger, the one who comes, to debug the existing integration, the one who discover. It has to be multi-sided, right? With multi facets to be able to answer everyone. It's really hard. And I remember a quote from Bruno Pedro. Now he's working at Postman these days, but he said, an API is as good as its documentation. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Or
I would say if an API doesn't have documentation, it doesn't exist. It's the phrase I use internally. It's very similar. It's not quite good as that. So, but his phrase is better. It's as good as its documentation, because if it doesn't do anything, it doesn't need documentation. As soon as it does something, you need to have some explanation.
You don't believe you have backend wizards developers who are able to find endpoints and parameters? No.
Oh no, they do exist, but then they keep getting new jobs and changing.
Yeah. So
that's the worst problem when you got one of them, is then they leave. We all know magic is there. In other words, they know who to buy for buy a beer to get the information out of. And this is actually a serious point. Don't from your joking point to a serious point here is, there are people that will go out there and actively find this information out to help them consume our APIs. But they do that by talking to the people who build and maintain the APIs. This takes the guys who build and maintain APIs focus away from building new APIs. So that's actually a bad thing, a net bad thing, because it's slowing down the new APIs being designed. By having all this available up front, you just stop their need from having to get distracted. Does that take your jokey point into a serious point? But it's a valid point you made.
Yeah, there is always a serious point in a joking point. So yeah, we're here on that.
Is.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Some congratulations on the chat. Thank you very much for being there with us. And now, now it's the lunchtime at least in Pacific time zone, right? Dinner time for European time zone. Yes, we will see each other in 50 minutes. 50. We will see each other in 50 minutes on these 3 tracks we have. We will continue on API product and monetization track here. The other technical track will be about API lifecycle management, and the other tracks will be about roundtable and workshops. We invite you to go there at 1:15 p.m. PST, PST time zone. Enjoy your break. You can, of course, have lunch. You can visit the expo booth or play to the treasure hunt that we organized. Thank you very much, and see you soon.